They humiliated the black maid during the wedding toast before the Mafia boss exposed their secret in front of everyone. Jasmine Carter stood at the side of the lavish banquet hall, her heart racing as the guests mingled around her. The smell of expensive perfume and fresh flowers filled the air, while the sound of crystal glasses clinking and soft music played in the background. It was a beautiful wedding, and Jasmine had been working tirelessly for weeks to ensure everything was perfect. But as she stood there, serving the guests with a smile that barely masked her nerves, something felt off. She had seen this before. The cold stares, the whispered comments behind her back. Being the only black maid in the room, Jasmine had grown used to the subtle racism that often came with the job. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, the humiliation was going to happen in front of everyone. As the bride and groom stood up for the toast, Jasmine placed a tray of champagne flutes on the table. The guests, all dressed in their finest clothes, raised their glasses, ready to toast to the happy couple. But before anyone could speak, the groom's best friend, Nathaniel Thompson, sneered as he made a snide comment about Jasmine's presence at the wedding. "What's the help doing here?" he laughed, his voice carrying across the room. Jasmine froze, her hands trembling slightly as she held the tray. The room fell silent for a moment, but then the whispers began. She could hear the judgment in their voices, feel the heat of their stares on her back. The bride's sister, Emily Harris, chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, it's embarrassing. Who let her in here?" Jasmine's face flushed with embarrassment, but she refused to show weakness. She had worked too hard to get this far, to be treated like this. But as she stood there, the weight of their words pressing down on her, something inside her snapped. She couldn't take it anymore. Just as she began to turn away, a commanding voice interrupted the tension in the room. "Enough." Everyone turned to look, surprised to see Dominic Don Castellano, the Mafia boss, standing in the doorway. His presence was like a storm that had suddenly entered the calm room, and the whispers died down as quickly as they had started. Dominic's cold eyes scanned the room, his gaze landing on Nathaniel and Emily. Without saying a word, he stepped forward, his every movement radiating power and authority. The room fell into a tense silence as Dominic walked up to the groom's best friend and grabbed the champagne flute from his hand. "You have something to say?" Dominic's voice was smooth, but the steel beneath it was unmistakable. Nathaniel stuttered, unable to form words. Emily's face turned pale. "You think it's funny to humiliate someone in front of your guests?" Dominic asked, his eyes never leaving Nathaniel's. The best friend tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. Dominic's eyes then turned to the bride's sister, Emily. "And you? Who do you think you are?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Emily stepped back, her face filled with fear. Dominic turned his attention back to Jasmine, his expression softening ever so slightly. "You're fine," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Go take a break." Jasmine, still in shock, nodded and quickly made her way out of the room. As she left, she couldn't believe what had just happened. The same man who had always been the silent observer, the man who controlled empires, had just stood up for her, in front of everyone. It wasn't just the power he had shown, it was the kindness, the unexpected gesture that had made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like she mattered. The wedding reception continued, the soft clinking of glasses and quiet murmurs filling the air as people tried to absorb what had just happened. Jasmine walked briskly down the hallway, her heart still racing from the unexpected scene that had unfolded moments before. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, trying to process everything. Just moments ago, she had been humiliated in front of the entire room, her dignity trampled by those who believed they were above her. And now, Dominic Castellano, the very man whose presence alone commanded power and fear, had stepped in to defend her. She couldn't shake the image of his stern yet surprisingly gentle face as he had spoken to her, telling her to take a break. As she reached the back room, Jasmine paused, leaning against the cool wall for a moment, trying to steady her breath. The room, now empty, felt like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally breathe. She had worked as a maid for the Castellano family for over a year now, doing everything from cleaning the mansion's endless rooms to organizing extravagant events like this one. She had always been invisible, doing her job quietly and with professionalism, never expecting anything in return. But today had been different. Today, her world had shifted. Dominic's voice, calm but firm, had sliced through the tension like a blade, and for the first time in a long while, Jasmine felt seen. It was a feeling she hadn't even realized she had craved. She had always thought of herself as nothing more than the help, just a woman of service with no place at the table of the powerful. Yet Dominic's words had changed that perception, if only for a moment. Jasmine didn't know what to make of it. He wasn't just the mafia boss who controlled vast empires. He was a man who had shown her kindness when she least expected it, and that was something that weighed heavily on her heart. As she took a seat in the back room, Jasmine glanced at the clock on the wall. The evening was still young, but the events had already left an indelible mark on her. She needed a moment to gather herself, to understand what had just happened. Meanwhile, back in the main hall, the atmosphere had shifted. The guests who had once been so eager to whisper behind Jasmine's back now found themselves at the mercy of Dominic's gaze. The shock of his intervention was still fresh in the air, and those who had once thought themselves untouchable now stood in the shadow of his authority. Nathaniel, who had been the first to mock Jasmine, was visibly uncomfortable, his usual bravado replaced by a palpable unease. Emily, the bride's sister, couldn't even bring herself to look anyone in the eye. The weight of Dominic's presence hung over them, and the once jovial celebration had lost its edge. The party had turned into a spectacle of uneasy glances and hushed conversations. Back in the back room, Jasmine remained seated, her thoughts wandering. What had Dominic seen in her? What had made him step in when no one else had? She had heard stories, of course, stories of Dominic Castellano's power and ruthlessness, how he could ruin someone's life with a single word, how people feared him. She had always known he was dangerous, but in that moment, she saw something else, something that had never been spoken of in the stories. Was it empathy? Compassion? It was hard to say. Jasmine didn't know him, and he didn't know her. But in that brief exchange, something had shifted. She wasn't sure if she would ever get the chance to understand it fully. As she stood to leave the room and head back to the party, the door opened slowly. To her surprise, it was Dominic who walked in. He stood in the doorway, tall and imposing, yet there was something different in his eyes, no longer the cold, calculating look of a man accustomed to control, but a softer gaze that seemed to reach her in a way she hadn't expected. "How are you holding up?" His voice, though calm, was filled with a quiet concern. Jasmine, taken aback, hesitated for a moment before replying, "I'm okay. Just needed a minute." Dominic nodded, stepping further into the room. The door clicked softly behind him, and the room felt even quieter. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but the silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. "You didn't deserve that," Dominic finally said, his voice steady but filled with an unusual warmth. Jasmine glanced up at him, surprised by his words. "It's fine," she replied softly, though deep down, she couldn't deny that the sting of humiliation still lingered. Dominic sighed, looking down for a moment, his jaw tightening. "No, it's not fine. People like Nathaniel and Emily, they think they can treat others however they want. But no one deserves to be treated like that, especially not you." His words, though simple, carried weight. They held an undeniable truth that made Jasmine's heart skip a beat. She wasn't sure what to say. All she knew was that in the presence of this man, someone who had always seemed untouchable, she felt heard. Jasmine took a deep breath, her eyes meeting Dominic's. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity. Dominic gave a small nod, his gaze unwavering. Just doing what's right. The moment stretched between them, and for the first time in a long time, Jasmine felt like she had a place in this world, like she mattered. But before she could say anything else, Dominic turned to leave, his steps purposeful. As he reached the door, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "We'll talk more later," he said, his voice soft yet commanding. With that, he walked out, leaving Jasmine standing in the quiet room, her mind racing. She didn't know what the future held or what would happen next, but for the first time, she felt like her life was about to change in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The next few days passed in a blur for Jasmine. Every time she tried to focus on her work, her thoughts would drift back to that moment at the wedding, when Dominic had stood up for her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in her life, though she couldn't yet put her finger on what it was. It was like the world had shifted ever so slightly, revealing a path she had never noticed before. She had always kept her head down, doing her job, trying not to attract attention. But now, after Dominic's intervention, she couldn't help but feel like a different person. She found herself walking through the halls of the Castellano mansion with a newfound sense of purpose. Her steps were a little lighter, her shoulders a little straighter. Even the way the other staff members looked at her had changed. It was as if they, too, recognized something had happened, though they said nothing about it. They simply treated her with more respect, a silent acknowledgement of the change that had come. Jasmine wasn't sure what to make of it, but she knew it was a step forward, and that was enough for her. One evening, as she was finishing up her shift and heading toward the back entrance, she spotted Dominic in the courtyard. He was standing near a stone fountain, looking out over the manicured garden, his hands clasped behind his back. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure of what to do. Should she go around him and leave quietly like always? Or should she take a chance and say something? She chose the latter, her feet carrying her forward before she could second-guess herself. "Mr. Castellano," she called softly, her voice unsure. He turned, his dark eyes meeting hers with an unreadable expression. There was a brief pause before he gave her a small nod. "Jasmine, right?" he asked. His voice was calm, but there was a softness to it that made her feel at ease. "Yes, sir," she replied, her hands wringing the hem of her uniform nervously. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did at the wedding. It meant a lot to me." Dominic's gaze softened slightly, and he took a step closer. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his tone quiet but sincere. "It was the right thing to do." Jasmine shifted from foot to foot, unsure of how to respond. She wasn't used to this kind of attention from someone like him, and it made her feel both awkward and grateful. I never expected anyone to stand up for me like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I've been working here for so long, and I've always just been invisible." Dominic looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers, as if he were trying to understand something. Then, to her surprise, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Everyone deserves to be seen," he said simply. "No one should feel invisible." Jasmine felt her heart skip a beat. His words struck a chord deep inside her, something she had never quite understood until now. It was strange to think that a man like Dominic Castellano, someone who had built an empire on power and control, could understand something as personal as feeling invisible. I don't know what to say," Jasmine admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't need to say anything," Dominic replied, his tone gentle. "Just know that I meant it." There was another moment of silence between them, and Jasmine felt her nerves begin to settle. She didn't know what it was about Dominic. Perhaps it was the way he spoke, or maybe it was the quiet authority he exuded. But there was something about him that made her feel like she could trust him, like she could be more than just the help. "Thank you," she said softly, the words feeling more real now. Dominic nodded once more, his eyes warm as he looked at her. "Take care of yourself, Jasmine," he said, turning his gaze back to the garden. "You're worth more than you think." As he walked away, Jasmine stood there for a moment, watching him go. The words he had said echoed in her mind, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could believe them. That night, as she lay in her small apartment, Jasmine couldn't help but think about what had happened. She had spent so many years hiding behind her work, convinced that her worth was tied to her ability to serve others. But Dominic's words had planted a seed in her mind, one that began to grow in the days that followed. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to start seeing herself the way Dominic had seen her, in a way that acknowledged her worth, her humanity, her strength. As she drifted off to sleep, a sense of calm settled over her. For the first time in a long time, Jasmine felt like she had the power to change her life. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was Jasmine Carter, and she had a future that was hers to shape. Days passed, and Jasmine found herself more focused than ever. The weight of the events at the wedding was still on her mind, but something in her had shifted. Dominic's words had planted a seed of self-worth that she hadn't even realized she was missing. She was no longer just the help, invisible and unnoticed. She was Jasmine Carter, and she had the power to shape her future. With each passing day, she walked a little taller, spoke a little louder, and smiled a little more. The other staff members noticed the change, though they never commented on it. Jasmine knew they could feel it, the new confidence that radiated from her. As the days turned into weeks, Jasmine's thoughts often drifted to Dominic. She had never expected that he, of all people, would be the one to see her. To hear her. To make her feel like she was something more than a maid. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much of an impact his words had on her. It wasn't just the fact that he had stood up for her. It was the way he had done it. Calm, collected, with a sense of justice that was undeniable. Dominic Castellano wasn't just a mafia boss. He was someone who, despite his power and wealth, understood the value of decency and respect. Jasmine had spent so many years hiding in the shadows, afraid to stand up for herself, afraid to ask for more. But now, she felt like she had the strength to change her own story. That morning, as she was going about her usual routine, preparing the mansion for the next event, she was surprised to find a note waiting for her in the break room. It was simple, handwritten on a small piece of paper, with just a few words. Meet me in the garden at 4 p.m. Dominic. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the note. Why would Dominic want to meet her in private? Her mind raced with possibilities. Was he upset about something? Was he going to fire her? Or was this just another act of kindness? She didn't know, but the uncertainty made her nervous. Still, she couldn't ignore the invitation. At 4 p.m., just as the note had said, Jasmine found herself walking toward the garden. The air was warm with the scent of blooming flowers, and the sound of a distant fountain added to the peaceful atmosphere. She spotted Dominic standing by the stone bench, his hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the carefully manicured landscape. When he saw her, he gave a small nod, acknowledging her presence. Jasmine, he said, his voice as calm as ever. Thank you for coming. Jasmine nodded, feeling a bit out of place. Of course, Mr. Castellano. Is everything okay? Dominic turned to face her, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity she had come to expect. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then he spoke, his voice softer than usual. I wanted to speak with you about something important. Jasmine's heart raced. What's going on? She asked, her voice betraying her anxiety. Dominic stepped closer, his presence imposing but somehow comforting at the same time. I've been watching you, Jasmine. I've seen the way you've been carrying yourself lately, the confidence you've gained. And I want to say that I'm proud of you. Jasmine blinked, surprised by his words. Proud of me, she repeated. For what? Dominic's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw a hint of something vulnerable in his eyes. For standing up for yourself. For not letting anyone walk all over you. You've come a long way. Jasmine's heart swelled with emotion. She hadn't expected this, not from him. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I never thought anyone would notice. I've always just tried to do my job and stay out of the way. Dominic smiled slightly. That's because you've been too humble. But you deserve more than that. You deserve to be seen, Jasmine. And you deserve to be treated with respect. His words hit her like a wave, crashing through the barriers she had built over the years. She had never imagined someone like Dominic, with all his power, would think that highly of her. Thank you, she said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. I didn't expect to hear that from you. Dominic gave a small nod, his expression serious. It's the truth, he said. You've earned it. Jasmine stood there, feeling overwhelmed by the weight of his words. For so long, she had hidden behind her work, convinced that she was nothing more than the help. But now, with Dominic's encouragement, she felt like she had a chance to become something more. I want to offer you something, Dominic continued, breaking the silence. Jasmine looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. What is it? She asked. I've been thinking about your future, he said. You've been working here for a long time, and I've seen your potential. I'd like to offer you a position in the office. Something more than just being a maid. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined something like this could happen. You mean, work in the office? She asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. Dominic nodded. Yes. You're smart, capable, and you've earned my trust. I think you could do well in a role that utilizes those qualities. Jasmine stood there, speechless. The offer was almost too much to comprehend. But as she looked into Dominic's eyes, she saw sincerity. She realized he wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a chance to build a new life, one where she was seen and respected for who she was. I don't know what to say, Jasmine said, her voice filled with emotion. This is incredible. Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile that made something inside her flutter. You don't have to say anything. Just know that the opportunity is there if you want it. Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment her life could change. And it was happening, right in front of her. As she stood there, in the quiet beauty of the garden, she realized that for the first time in her life, she had control over her future. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was Jasmine Carter, and the world was waiting for her. The days that followed Dominic's offer felt like a whirlwind for Jasmine. She had always thought her life would remain the same, a constant cycle of hard work, quiet existence, and never being more than just the maid. But now, she found herself standing at the edge of something entirely new. The office job that Dominic had offered her was an opportunity she had never dreamed of. It was more than just a change in job title. It was a chance to prove to herself that she was capable of so much more. She had always known she was capable, but she had never been given the chance to show it. Now, with Dominic's offer, that chance was finally within her reach. Over the next week, Jasmine spent her free time learning as much as she could. She asked the office staff about their roles, read through files, and even started shadowing a few of the assistants. It was overwhelming at first, but the more she learned, the more confident she became. It wasn't easy. There were moments when she doubted herself, wondering if she was really ready for this change. But with each passing day, she grew more certain. She had spent so many years in the background, unsure of her own worth. Now, she was stepping into the spotlight, ready to take control of her own future. As the day for her transition into the office role approached, Jasmine couldn't help but feel a sense of nervous excitement. She stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment, adjusting the blouse and skirt she had carefully chosen for her first day. It wasn't much, but it was a step toward something better. She smiled at her reflection, still finding it hard to believe that this was her life now. As she walked through the mansion that morning, the staff greeted her with smiles and nods, though they were still getting used to the change. It wasn't just her new role they were adjusting to. It was the fact that Jasmine, the quiet maid they had all known for so long, was now stepping into a position of importance. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but instead of feeling self-conscious, she held her head a little higher. As she entered the office for the first time, her heart pounded in her chest. The walls were lined with books and sleek furniture, and the air was filled with the soft hum of a well-run operation. She had never imagined herself here, sitting at a desk and typing away at a computer, making decisions and handling important tasks. It felt surreal. Dominic was already there when she arrived, standing near his desk, his arms crossed as he observed her. He gave her a small smile as she walked in. "Good morning, Jasmine," he said, his voice steady and confident. "Ready for your first day?" She nodded, her nerves momentarily forgotten in the face of his calm demeanor. "Yes, Mr. Castellano. I'm ready." He motioned to the chair in front of his desk. "Take a seat. Let's get started." The hours passed quickly as Jasmine settled into her new role. There was a lot to learn, but Dominic was patient with her, offering guidance whenever she needed it. He even took time to explain the importance of certain tasks, giving her insight into the workings of the business that she had never imagined. Jasmine quickly realized that she was more capable than she had given herself credit for. The work wasn't as daunting as she had initially thought, and soon, she found herself handling tasks on her own, with confidence and precision. As the day came to an end, Jasmine stood up from her desk, stretching slightly as she looked around the office. It was a small step, but it was a step forward. She had spent so many years in the background, afraid to ask for more, afraid to take risks. But now, she had taken that leap, and it felt good. Dominic came over as she was gathering her things. "You did well today," he said, his voice genuine. "I knew you had it in you." Jasmine smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Castellano, for everything." Dominic nodded, his eyes locking with hers. "This is just the beginning, Jasmine. Don't ever forget that you're capable of great things." As she left the office and walked down the hallway, Jasmine felt a sense of pride that she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was Jasmine Carter, and she was ready to take on the world. The next few weeks passed in a blur of new challenges and triumphs. Jasmine continued to settle into her new role, and with each passing day, she became more confident in her abilities. She found herself interacting with the staff in a way she had never done before, no longer just someone to be ordered around, but someone who had a voice, someone who was listened to. As time went on, Jasmine realized that her relationship with Dominic had also shifted. He no longer felt like an imposing figure she had to fear. Instead, he became a mentor, someone she could trust and learn from. He continued to offer her advice and support, but now, there was a level of respect between them that went beyond the typical boss-employee dynamic. It was clear that Dominic saw something in her, something that made him believe in her potential. And Jasmine was beginning to believe in herself, too. One afternoon, as she was leaving the office, Dominic caught her on her way out. "Jasmine," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "I need you to do something for me." She paused, turning toward him. "Of course, Mr. Castellano. What is it?" He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I'm giving you a project. Something that's going to require your attention and your ability to think critically. I believe you're ready for it." Jasmine felt a surge of excitement and nerves all at once. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. Dominic smiled, his eyes proud. "I knew you would be." Jasmine walked away that day with a sense of purpose that she had never felt before. She was no longer just the maid at the Castellano mansion. She was a valued member of the team, someone who had earned their place. And she was about to prove to herself, and to everyone else, that she was capable of so much more. The project Dominic had assigned Jasmine felt like the turning point in her career at the Castellano mansion. She had been given a task that required her to prove not only her capability, but her growing potential. The work was more challenging than anything she had done before, but it was exactly what she needed. She had spent most of her life working in the background, making sure the mansion ran smoothly, but now she was stepping up in a way that was both thrilling and intimidating. Dominic had trusted her with a critical task, one that involved organizing an upcoming high-stakes event for one of his most important business partners. It was a dinner, and everything had to be perfect. The pressure was on, but Jasmine didn't let it overwhelm her. She was determined to show Dominic that he had made the right choice in believing in her. Over the next few days, Jasmine meticulously planned every detail of the event. She coordinated with caterers, florists, and security, making sure every element aligned with the high standards Dominic had set. She spent hours drafting emails, reviewing timelines, and organizing every small detail, down to the placement of each glass at the dinner table. The sense of responsibility that came with the project made Jasmine feel more powerful than she had ever felt in her life. It was the first time she felt like she was truly in charge of something, and the sense of pride she took in her work was unlike anything she had experienced before. As the day of the event drew closer, Jasmine's nerves began to set in. The event had to go flawlessly. There were no second chances with Dominic's business partners. But every time the weight of the task seemed too much to bear, she remembered his words, "You're capable of great things." She repeated them to herself as she checked and double-checked the arrangements. Finally, the day arrived. The mansion was bustling with activity as the staff prepared for the event. Jasmine was running from room to room, making sure everything was perfect. The house was filled with the sound of conversations, clinking dishes, and the occasional hiss of a vacuum cleaner being quickly pushed through the hallways. It was a familiar scene, but today felt different. Today, Jasmine wasn't just another member of the staff, she was the one making sure everything went right. As the evening approached and the first guests started arriving, Jasmine felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She stood by the entrance, greeting the guests with a professional smile, making sure they were all taken care of. Each person who entered the mansion seemed to be more important than the last, and Jasmine could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. She kept checking in with the staff, making sure the food was ready, the drinks were flowing, and the guests were comfortable. As the night went on, Jasmine watched as the event unfolded. The guests laughed and conversed, the wine glasses were refilled, and everything seemed to be running smoothly. Still, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness. It wasn't until the dinner itself began that she finally breathed a sigh of relief. The dishes were perfect, the table was set just right, and the atmosphere was exactly what it needed to be. Dominic's business partners were impressed, and the event was a success. As the last course was served, Jasmine found herself standing near the back of the room, her heart racing as she looked around. She had done it. She had successfully managed an event of this magnitude, something she never thought was possible for someone like her. Dominic noticed her from across the room, and their eyes met. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of her hard work. Jasmine couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just the success of the event that made her feel good. It was the realization that she had earned this moment. She had stepped up, faced her fears, and come out victorious. Later that evening, as the guests began to leave, Dominic approached Jasmine. "You did well tonight," he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of approval. Jasmine felt her heart swell. "Thank you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I couldn't have done it without the team," she added. Dominic smiled slightly. "You led them well, and you handled everything perfectly." His words meant more to her than she could express. She had never expected this kind of recognition. She had always been the one doing the work in the background, but now, she was being seen. "It's what I've always wanted," Jasmine said quietly, more to herself than to Dominic. "To be more than just the help." Dominic looked at her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "You are more than just the help, Jasmine. You're part of this team, and you're capable of even more than you realize." Jasmine felt her cheeks warm at his words. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic gave her a final nod, a silent gesture of approval. "You've earned it," he said before turning to walk away. Jasmine stood there for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had earned it. She had proven herself, not only to him, but to herself as well. For the first time in her life, Jasmine felt like she had a future she could shape. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was someone who mattered, someone with a place at the table. And as she walked through the halls of the mansion that night, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in her step. She had taken control of her destiny, and there was no turning back now. I had spent the last few weeks settling into my new role, gaining confidence with every task I completed. The shift from maid to office assistant had been nothing short of transformative. It wasn't just the work I was doing. It was how I was beginning to see myself. For so long, I had been invisible in the eyes of others, but now I was someone who was valued, someone who was seen. And that feeling was both exhilarating and terrifying. Each morning as I walked through the halls of the Castellano mansion, I carried with me a sense of purpose. I wasn't just walking to another day of menial work. I was walking toward my future, one that was being shaped by my own hands. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if I truly belonged in the world I was entering. But every time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself of what Dominic had said to me. "You're capable of great things." Those words had stuck with me, like a lifeline, pulling me forward even when the path ahead seemed unclear. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk organizing some paperwork, I heard a knock at the door. I looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his usual calm and collected demeanor in place. He was wearing his dark suit, his posture commanding, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made me pause. "Jasmine," he said, his voice steady. "Can you come with me for a moment? I need to discuss something with you." My heart skipped a beat. I had grown used to working with him in the office, but there was something in his tone that made me nervous. "Of course, Mr. Castellano," I replied, standing up quickly and following him. He led me through the mansion, past the grand dining hall, and out into the courtyard. The garden was quiet, with only the soft rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant sound of water trickling from the fountain. It felt peaceful out here, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. Dominic stopped by the edge of the fountain, turning to face me. "I wanted to talk to you about something important," he began, his gaze never leaving mine. I waited, unsure of what he was going to say. "You've been doing excellent work, Jasmine. You've impressed everyone with your organization and your ability to handle pressure. But I know that you're capable of even more than what you've done so far." I felt a small flush of pride at his words, but I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "There's an opportunity that's come up," he said, his voice lowering slightly. "A position in the company that I think you'd be perfect for. It's not something that I offer lightly, but I want you to consider it." My heart began to race. A position in the company? Was he offering me something more permanent, something that went beyond just helping with events? Dominic continued, his tone serious. "It would involve more responsibility, more oversight, and a lot more decision-making. You'd be in charge of coordinating a few key projects, working closely with the business partners. I believe you have the potential to handle this, Jasmine." I stood there stunned. This was more than I had ever imagined. A full-time position in the company, not just a temporary role or a small assignment. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile. You don't have to say anything right now. Just think about it. I believe in you, Jasmine, and I think this could be the next step in your journey. My mind was racing. This was the kind of opportunity one had always dreamed of, but had never dared to believe could actually happen. I had always kept my head down, focused on doing my job well, never imagining I could rise above my position. But now, here I was, being offered a chance to do something more, something that could change everything. Thank you, I said finally, my voice soft but filled with gratitude. I'll think about it. I never expected anything like this. Dominic gave a small nod. I know, and that's exactly why I'm offering it to you. You've earned it, Jasmine. You've worked hard, and you've proven yourself. Now it's time for you to step up and take on something greater. I nodded, trying to absorb everything he had said. The weight of the offer was heavy, but it was also exhilarating. I was on the cusp of something bigger, something I had never thought possible. I'll let you know soon, I said, my voice steady. Dominic's expression softened. Take your time. This is your decision, Jasmine. No rush. As he turned to leave, he paused for a moment and looked back at me. And remember, you're not just the help anymore. You're a part of this team. Never forget that. I stood there, watching him walk away, the words he had said echoing in my mind. I wasn't just the help anymore. I was Jasmine Carter, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. I stood in the quiet office, the offer that Dominic had made still lingering in the air like a weight I couldn't shake. It was a moment I had never anticipated, never even dreamed of. A promotion within the company. A chance to prove myself beyond the role I had held for so long. The decision felt enormous, but deep down, I knew it was something I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the job. It was about the opportunity to truly change my life. For years, I had been stuck in a cycle, working hard but always in the background, never seen as more than a maid. But now, Dominic had given me a glimpse of something bigger, something that would take me out of the shadows and into a space where my skills and abilities would be recognized. As I sat at my desk that afternoon, the offer weighing on my mind, I thought about everything that had led me to this moment. I thought about the wedding night, how I had been humiliated in front of everyone, and how, in that instant, I had never felt more invisible. But then, I remembered Dominic's intervention, how he had stepped in to defend me, to show me that I was more than what they had made me feel. That moment had changed something inside me. It had given me the courage to start believing in myself. I had worked for years, never once questioning my place. But now, everything felt different. As the evening approached, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. It wasn't just about the offer anymore. It was about taking that next step. I had to make a decision, and it had to be the right one. The sound of footsteps broke my thoughts, and I looked up to see Dominic entering the office, his usual calm presence filling the room. Have you thought about the offer? He asked, his voice steady. I nodded slowly. I have. I replied, my voice quiet but sure. And I want to accept it. Dominic smiled, a small but genuine smile that made something inside me flutter. I knew you would, he said. But remember, this isn't just about a job. It's about what you can do with this opportunity. His words stuck with me, echoing in my mind. It wasn't just about the position. It was about what I could become with the chance he had given me. I won't let you down, I said, my voice steady. Dominic nodded, his gaze softening. I know you won't. You've already proven yourself. As the days passed, I settled into my new role with a mix of excitement and nervousness. There were moments when I felt unsure of myself, moments when I wondered if I truly belonged in this new world. But with every task, every responsibility, I began to feel more confident. I was no longer just the help. I was a part of something bigger, something that I had earned through hard work and determination. As the weeks went by, I found myself working closely with Dominic, coordinating projects, attending meetings, and making decisions that had once seemed so far out of reach. It was challenging, but it was also thrilling. The more I learned, the more I realized that this was the life I had always wanted. One night, after a particularly busy day, Dominic asked me to stay late to go over some details for an upcoming event. As we sat in the office, reviewing the plans, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. It wasn't just the work, it was the way Dominic had trusted me with so much. I had earned his respect, and in doing so, I had begun to respect myself. You've come a long way, Jasmine, Dominic said as we looked over the plans. I'm impressed by how you've handled everything. You've got a natural talent for this. His words warmed me more than I expected. Thank you, I said, feeling a small smile tug at my lips. I never thought I could do something like this, but I'm starting to believe I can. Dominic leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying me for a moment. I always knew you could, he said quietly. You've got a fire inside you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you're not good enough. Those words hit me harder than I anticipated. For so long, I had believed the opposite. I had believed that I was just the maid, that I had no place in the world of power and influence that surrounded Dominic. But now, I was beginning to understand that I had more to offer than I had ever realized. As I left the office that night, the weight of everything that had changed in my life hit me all at once. I wasn't just the maid anymore. I wasn't invisible. I had a future ahead of me, one that I had the power to shape. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had earned this place. I had earned the chance to build something of my own, to take control of my destiny. I wasn't just Jasmine Carter, the maid. I was Jasmine Carter, someone with the strength to create her own future. And I knew that this was only the beginning. I had been working in my new position for a few weeks now, and every day felt like a fresh challenge. I had made so much progress since Dominic had first offered me the role. The work was demanding, but I found myself rising to meet it, just as he had believed I would. As the days passed, my confidence continued to grow, and with it, my sense of belonging in this new world. No longer did I feel like the invisible maid in the shadows. I was Jasmine Carter, an integral part of the Castellano operation. One morning, as I sat at my desk preparing for the day's meetings, I heard a knock on the door. I looked up to see Dominic standing in the doorway, looking as calm and collected as always. Morning, Jasmine, he said, his voice smooth. Can I speak with you for a moment? I stood up quickly, a little surprised by the visit. Of course, Mr. Castellano. He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. I wanted to discuss something with you, he said, his tone serious. I felt a surge of nerves. Had I done something wrong? Was he going to reprimand me? But when I looked at him, I saw that his expression was calm, almost thoughtful. I've been observing your progress over the past few weeks, he continued. You've handled everything I've thrown at you with grace and efficiency. I'm impressed. I felt a flush of pride, but I tried to keep my expression neutral. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. I've been working hard to prove myself. Dominic nodded. I can see that, and I think it's time for the next step. My heart skipped a beat. The next step? What did that mean? Was there another opportunity? What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I've been considering giving you more responsibility, he said. I want you to help lead a new project. It's an important one, and I think you're ready. A new project? I was stunned. You want me to lead it? I asked, still processing what he was saying. Yes, he replied, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my heart race. You've shown that you're capable of handling more, and I think this is the right time for you to step up. I stood there in shock. I had come so far from the woman I had once been, the woman who thought she would always be invisible. Now, I was being entrusted with something bigger, something that would test everything I had learned. I don't know what to say, I stammered. This is a huge opportunity. Dominic smiled, his expression softening. You don't need to say anything right now. Just know that I believe in you, Jasmine. And this project will be your chance to show everyone, including yourself, what you're truly capable of. His words sank in slowly, like a weight lifting off my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been working toward. I wasn't just someone who had been given a chance. I was someone who had earned it. I'll do my best, I said, my voice filled with conviction. I won't let you down. Dominic nodded, his eyes proud. I know you won't. Now, let's talk about the details of the project. We spent the next hour going over the specifics. Dominic outlined the goals, the timeline, and the expectations for the project. It would require careful coordination with several key people in the business, and I would be responsible for overseeing every step of the process. As we spoke, I realized just how much trust Dominic was placing in me. This wasn't just about handling tasks anymore. It was about taking charge, making decisions, and leading a team. When the meeting ended, I felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. The weight of the responsibility was heavy, but it was also exhilarating. I knew that this was my chance to prove that I belonged in this world, and that I was capable of achieving more than I had ever imagined. As I walked back to my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I wasn't just the person who made sure everything was running smoothly in the background. I was a leader, someone with power and influence. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt. But I was ready for it. I had come too far to turn back now. I was Jasmine Carter, and I was about to take the next step in my journey. The future was waiting for me, and I was ready to face it head on. I woke up early the next morning, the weight of the task ahead settling heavily on my shoulders. The project Dominic had given me wasn't just a test of my skills. It was a test of everything I had learned in my time at the Castellano mansion. I wasn't just managing an event or a simple task anymore. This was something bigger, something that required me to lead, to think critically, and to make decisions that would affect the future of the business. As I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my clothes and making sure everything was in place, I felt a surge of nerves. It was a feeling I had grown accustomed to recently, but today, it felt more intense. This project was my chance to prove myself not only to Dominic, but to myself. I had spent so much of my life in the background, never questioning my place, but now, I was stepping forward into something much more. I couldn't afford to let fear hold me back. After a quick breakfast, I made my way to the office. The staff greeted me as usual, but there was a difference in the way they looked at me now. They were no longer just co-workers or fellow staff members. They were my team. I was in charge of this project, and it was time for me to lead. I walked into Dominic's office, where we would meet to discuss the details before the project officially began. As always, he was already there, waiting, his usual calm demeanor in place. "Good morning, Jasmine," he said, his voice steady and confident. "Ready to get started?" I nodded, trying to steady my nerves. "I'm ready," I replied. We sat down, and Dominic went over the specifics of the project again. It was a high-profile initiative that required careful planning and attention to detail. There were clients involved, key business decisions to be made, and timelines that had to be met. Every detail mattered, and it was up to me to make sure everything went smoothly. As Dominic spoke, I listened carefully, taking notes and asking questions when necessary. I was still learning the ins and outs of the business, but I had picked up enough over the past few weeks to understand the bigger picture. Dominic wasn't just giving me a task to complete. He was giving me an opportunity to lead and to show what I was capable of. The weight of that responsibility wasn't lost on me, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt empowered. This was my chance to prove that I could handle more than just the day-to-day tasks. As the meeting wrapped up, Dominic gave me one last piece of advice. "Remember, Jasmine," he said, "this is your project. You've earned the trust to lead it, and I know you'll do well. But don't be afraid to take charge and make decisions. Trust your instincts." His words stayed with me long after the meeting ended. As I left his office and made my way back to my desk, I felt a new sense of confidence. This wasn't just about completing a task. It was about taking control of my own destiny and showing everyone, including myself, that I was capable of handling responsibility. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I spent every waking hour working on the project, coordinating with various departments, organizing meetings, and making decisions that would shape the outcome. There were moments when I doubted myself, moments when I questioned whether I was truly capable of handling everything. But every time those doubts crept in, I reminded myself of Dominic's words, "Trust your instincts." And with each decision I made, each task I completed, I grew more confident. I could do this. The project began to take shape, and soon, the pieces started falling into place. It wasn't perfect, and there were bumps along the way, but I kept pushing forward, determined to see it through. I could feel Dominic's support in the background, but more than that, I felt the trust he had placed in me. It was a responsibility I didn't take lightly. As the project neared its final stages, I began to see the fruits of my labor. The team had come together, the clients were satisfied, and everything was falling into place. I had done it. I had led the project from start to finish, and it was a success. The sense of accomplishment that filled me was indescribable. I had proven to myself that I was capable of so much more than I had ever imagined. When the project was finally completed, I stood back and looked at everything we had accomplished. It wasn't just about the success of the project itself, it was about the journey. I had grown, learned, and transformed into someone I never thought I could be. As I stood in the office that evening, reviewing the final details, Dominic walked in. He looked at me, and there was a small, approving smile on his face. "Well done, Jasmine," he said. "You did an excellent job." I felt a wave of pride wash over me. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without your trust and support." Dominic gave a small nod. "You earned it. You've proven yourself. This is just the beginning." His words hit me like a wave. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a turning point. I had taken control of my life, and now I was ready for whatever came next. As I left the office that night, I felt a sense of pride I had never known before. I wasn't just Jasmine Carter, the maid, anymore. I was Jasmine Carter, someone who had earned her place in the world. And that was a feeling I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I had never felt more alive than I did in that moment. The project had been a success, something I could hold my head up high for. Dominic had given me the opportunity to lead, and I had proven that I could handle the responsibility. For the first time, I saw myself in a new light. I wasn't the maid anymore. I was someone capable of making decisions, of leading a team, of creating something important. But even as the sense of accomplishment filled me, I knew that there was still more to come. The success of the project was just the beginning. It was a stepping stone, a sign that I was on the right path. I had worked hard to get to this point, but I knew there was much more for me to learn, more opportunities to seize, and more challenges to face. The feeling of being seen and valued was intoxicating. It was a feeling I had never experienced before in my life. For years, I had been overlooked, treated as invisible, just another part of the background. But now, I was becoming someone who mattered. Dominic's words echoed in my mind, the encouragement he had given me after the project was completed. "This is just the beginning," he had said. And as I walked through the halls of the Castellano mansion, I realized just how true that was. I wasn't just part of the background anymore. I was part of something much bigger, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, I continued to work closely with Dominic, taking on more responsibilities and further proving my worth. The trust he had placed in me was something I didn't take lightly. He had believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and now I was determined to show him that his faith was not misplaced. With each task, I grew more confident, more comfortable in my new role. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt and fear, but I had learned to push through them. I had learned to trust my instincts, to make decisions even when I wasn't sure I had all the answers. But as I stood in the office one afternoon, reviewing a new project, I felt a sense of clarity. This was my path. I wasn't just moving through life. I was actively shaping it, making decisions that would lead me to places I had never imagined. As I looked up from my desk, I saw Dominic walking toward me, a rare smile on his face. "How's everything going?" he asked, his tone warm. "It's going well," I replied, feeling a sense of pride in my voice. "I've got everything under control." He nodded, clearly pleased. "I knew I made the right choice in trusting you. You've really come into your own, Jasmine." His words sent a wave of warmth through me. "Thank you," I said, my voice sincere. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Dominic gave a small smile. "You're doing all the work, Jasmine. I'm just here to help you get to where you're meant to be." His words were simple, but they meant more to me than I could express. For so long, I had thought that I was stuck in a cycle, that I would always be overlooked, always be the one in the background. But now, I was taking control of my life, shaping my future, and proving to myself that I was capable of achieving great things. As I walked out of the office that evening, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't experienced in a long time. I had come so far since that day Dominic had first offered me the opportunity to lead the project. I wasn't just Jasmine Carter, the maid anymore. I was Jasmine Carter, someone who had earned her place, someone who was moving forward, someone who was becoming the person I had always dreamed of being. And as I looked toward the future, I knew this was only the beginning. There was so much more for me to do, so much more to achieve, and I was ready for every challenge that came my way. The path ahead was clear, and I was more than ready to walk it. I had become accustomed to the routine of my new role, but every day still held something fresh, a new challenge to overcome. Dominic had continued to put his trust in me, giving me more and more responsibility, and with each new task, I proved to myself that I was capable of handling it. My confidence had grown, and I no longer hesitated when making decisions. It was clear now that I was no longer just the maid. I was a valued member of the team, someone whose contributions mattered. As time went on, I had become more involved in the decision-making process. I worked alongside Dominic on various projects, contributing ideas and making suggestions. It felt empowering to have my voice heard, to know that I had a say in the direction of things. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments when I doubted my abilities, but I had learned to trust myself. One afternoon, Dominic called me into his office. I had been working on some reports, and the call made me nervous. Had I missed something? Was there something wrong with the way I was handling my responsibilities? As I walked into his office, I tried to calm my nerves, but the tension in my chest wouldn't ease. "Jasmine, come in," Dominic said, looking up from his desk with his usual calm demeanor. "I wanted to talk to you about something." I sat down across from him, still unsure of what he was going to say. "You've been doing excellent work," he began, his tone serious but warm. "You've handled everything I've thrown at you with skill and determination. But I think it's time for you to take the next step." My heart skipped a beat. The next step? What did that mean? Was I being promoted again? Was there more responsibility coming my way? Dominic continued, seeing the confusion on my face. "I want to offer you a leadership position. You've proven yourself time and again, and I think you're ready for more. I'd like you to manage a larger team and oversee several projects at once. You'll have more authority, more decision-making power, and a greater role in shaping the future of the business." I sat there, stunned, trying to process what he had just said. A leadership position? Was he serious? This was more than I had ever imagined. I had started out as a maid, just another face in the background, and now I was being offered the chance to lead? It felt surreal. I don't know what to say," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is such a huge opportunity." Dominic smiled, clearly pleased with my reaction. "You don't need to say anything right now. Just take some time to think about it. But I want you to know that I believe you're ready for this. You've earned it." I nodded slowly, still processing the weight of his words. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a defining moment in my life. It wasn't just about the position. It was about the trust Dominic had in me, the belief he had in my abilities. I had worked so hard to get to this point, but I had never imagined that I would be given such an opportunity. "I'll think about it," I said finally, my voice steady. "But I want you to know that I'm honored by the offer." Dominic gave me a small, approving nod. "Take your time. I have no doubt that you'll make the right decision." As I left his office that day, my mind was racing. A leadership position? This was everything I had ever wanted, everything I had worked for. The thought of managing a team, having more responsibility, more power, it was both exciting and terrifying. But as I walked through the halls of the mansion, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was my moment. This was my chance to take control of my future, to show everyone, including myself, that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. The next few days were a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. I went over everything Dominic had said, weighing the pros and cons of accepting such a huge responsibility. It was a big step, one that would require all of my energy and focus. But deep down, I knew I was ready. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, just trying to get by, but now I was stepping into the light. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear that had once held me back was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that I had never known before. I was ready to lead. On the third day after Dominic's offer, I finally made my decision. I walked into his office, my heart pounding with excitement. "Dominic," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've thought about it, and I want to accept the offer. I'm ready to take the next step." Dominic looked up at me, his eyes filled with approval. "I knew you would," he said, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Welcome to the next chapter, Jasmine." His words hit me like a wave. I had done it. I had stepped into the future I had once only dreamed of. The road ahead would not be easy, but I knew one thing for sure. I was ready. I was Jasmine Carter, and I was no longer afraid of what the future held. I was going to take it, one step at a time, and show the world what I was capable of. I stood at the threshold of the office, my heart racing with anticipation. The decision I had made felt monumental, and now, it was time to dive in fully. I had accepted the leadership position, and with it came new challenges, new opportunities, and a new sense of responsibility. I had worked my way up from being invisible, just another face among the staff, to someone who now had a seat at the table, making decisions that would shape the future of the Castellano business. As I stepped into the office, I felt the weight of my new role settle around me. The quiet buzz of the office filled the air as I walked past my colleagues, some of whom I had once worked alongside, and now I was their leader. The idea was still new, still something I was adjusting to, but the sense of pride and determination within me was undeniable. Dominic had placed his trust in me, and I was determined to live up to it. Over the past few days, I had been preparing for this. I had been meeting with the different teams, learning about the various projects I would oversee, and slowly, I was becoming more comfortable in my new role. But today it felt real. Today, I was going to step into this leadership role fully. I sat at my desk, reviewing some of the tasks that had been delegated to me. As I went through the files, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. This was the kind of work I had once thought was out of my reach, but now it was mine to manage. I was in control, and I was ready for the challenges that would come. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Dominic. Meeting at 2 p.m. We need to discuss the next phase of the project. I glanced at the clock, just an hour until the meeting. My stomach fluttered with a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was it. This was my moment to shine, to show that I was ready for the next level. As the clock struck 2 o'clock, I walked into the conference room, where Dominic and a few of the other key team members were already seated. Dominic looked up as I entered, giving me a small, encouraging smile. "Jasmine, glad you could join us," he said, motioning to the seat at the table. "Let's get started." I took my seat, and the meeting began. For the next hour, we discussed the next steps for the upcoming project, detailing deadlines, strategies, and goals. I was actively involved in every part of the discussion, offering input, asking questions, and making decisions that aligned with the team's overall vision. As the meeting came to an end, I felt a rush of adrenaline. It had gone well, better than I had expected. I had held my own, offered valuable insights, and worked alongside Dominic and the team as an equal. As the others filed out of the room, Dominic stayed behind, walking over to my side. "You did well today, Jasmine," he said, his voice warm. "You were confident, decisive, and you brought great ideas to the table. I'm proud of you." His words filled me with a sense of pride that I had never known before. For so long, I had doubted myself, wondering if I was good enough, if I truly belonged in this world. But today, Dominic had affirmed everything I had worked for. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "It means a lot to hear that from you." He gave me a small, approving smile. "You've earned it," he said. "You've come a long way, and this is just the beginning." As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at me. "Remember, Jasmine, you're not just a part of this company. You are shaping it. You have the power to make a real impact here." His words stuck with me as I sat there, staring at the empty conference room. I wasn't just taking on a leadership role, I was becoming someone who could shape the direction of the business, someone whose decisions would matter. This was my moment. This was my time. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and new projects. But each day, I grew more confident. I was no longer just the maid, no longer just a background figure in the Castellano household. I was Jasmine Carter, a leader, someone who was making a difference. With each passing day, I realized how far I had come. I had spent so many years feeling invisible, unsure of my place in the world. But now, I was standing tall, confident in the knowledge that I had earned my place here. As I walked through the halls of the mansion, the familiar faces of the staff greeted me. But this time, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I was part of something bigger, and I was making an impact. The future was wide open before me, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. As I sat at my desk later that evening, reviewing the progress of the latest project, I couldn't help but smile to myself. This was only the beginning, and I was excited to see where this journey would take me. I had proven to myself that I was capable of achieving great things, and now, there was no limit to what I could do.